Hello and welcome to Film Companion South. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Thimiram, which is on the Near OTT platform and directed by Shivaram Mony. Now, early on, we see a mother serving her little boy and her little girl. The little boy gets two pieces of fish. The little girl gets one piece of fish. The mother herself says, "This is enough for her." And later we get a scene of the boy lazing around, the girl is sweeping, then doing work in general, and we get an idea of where this is slowly leading to because the boy grows up and becomes a voyeur. He likes to see women bathe, he likes to see couples making out. Now all of this is sort of a flashback, and when we finally meet this character called Sudhakaran and played by K.K. Sudhakaran, he is old, he is in his 70s, he needs a cataract operation, and therefore whenever we get a shot from his point of view, the camera, it's as though it's been smeared with Vaseline, it's unclear, and we just see not much of what he sees. But old habits die hard, right? So the fact that Sudhakaran has a cataract situation hasn't changed the way he behaves with the women around him. He goes after a local sex worker, he harasses a widow who runs a grocery store, a small provision store in the neighborhood, and even his daughter-in-law, played by Nair, gets the full treatment. She didn't bring in much dowry. That itself irritates him a hell of a lot, so he won't even allow her to serve him. But more than that, when by mistake she puts her slippers on the top shelf of the slipper rack, he kind of gets really angry because according to him, women's slippers should be below the slippers of men. The cataract therefore becomes a metaphor for Shivaram's blindness, his inability to see men and women as equals, and his inability to treat women as equal to him. We in fact on this very same OTT platform, Near, saw two such men in this marvelous film called The Great Indian Kitchen. The other major character in Thimiram is also male. His name is Ram and he's played by Vishak Nair. He is Sudhakaran's son and he's a very loyal son. He's a struggling screenwriter, but what defines him more than his screenwriting is his loyalty to his father despite the old man's obviously disgusting behavior. And that tells us a lot about Ram, who is outwardly, at least outwardly, he seems to be a very, very decent man. And we get a picture of Sudhakaran's wife too, who quietly puts up with her husband's horrible behavior, sweeps them under the carpet instead of shouting them out to the public that this is my husband's exploits. And so we get the picture of a society that has collectively created a whole bunch of male chauvinists, a whole bunch of horrible people, horrible men like Sudhakaran. What's nice about Thimiram is the writing. I really like the way that it doesn't treat Sudhakaran like an obvious monster. He shows his monstrous behavior, but the way he's written is like a very normal, ordinary man with ordinary financial problems. He's got a diabetic problems, he's got cataract problems. So he's like a very ordinary man with ordinary problems, except that we also know that he has this other major issue. But what does this whole sexual angle, this peeping Tom angle, bring to the situation? That I'm not so sure. Because with the individual people, that is the local sex worker that I talked about earlier, or the widow who runs a provision store I talked about earlier as well, I can understand him going after these women because he thinks women are cheap and they are meant to serve him in every possible way. In fact, he even has a line that says, it is natural for men to want to touch women. But the peeping Tom syndrome, or that psychological thing where you spy on people making love, it's not just about the women because he's spying on the men too. And I don't know if that psychological deviance, that sexual deviance belongs in this movie exactly. But I have to admit that it involves a major plot point towards the end, which is about this guy's son, that is Sudhakaran's son, and his daughter-in-law, and it kind of causes the climactic explosion. The women in this movie are generally shown to be nice people. The daughter-in-law, for example, gives a gold bangle when she knows that the house needs financial help. The widow that I talked about earlier, she doesn't depend on men. She runs her own business, a small provision store to pay for her own needs. There's even a nurse that takes care of Sudhakaran later on, and she doesn't take any nonsense from him. And there are women like Sudhakaran's wife who even sacrifice, if that's the word, their own world for the world of Sudhakaran, because he stopped this woman from working after marriage, because if a woman has income after marriage, then they will become more dominating towards the men, is his philosophy, and because of this philosophy, the wife stopped working. But all the same, I felt that these messages messages are hammered across a little too much. I felt that they were told in a much lovelier, much more subtle way in The Great Indian Kitchen, though one could argue that The Great Indian Kitchen was told from the woman's point of view, whereas here we have the same kind of thing from the men's point of view. What I liked about this film is that they underplay the drama for the most part, which makes it seem like all of the shit that we're seeing is natural almost. It's not special within this context of this society. It's almost natural that these things happen, and therefore they don't have to be highlighted or magnified until, of course, the climactic portions. And that may be the whole point of this movie Thimiram, which has 3 chapters based on the letters Thi, Mi and Ram, that society has learned to accept and live with creatures like Sudhakaran as normal people rather than as extraordinary creatures. So that's it about Thimiram. Like I said, I don't think it's as great a film as The Great Indian Kitchen, but I do think it will make an interesting double bill if you watch both these films together. If you like this video, do subscribe to Film Companion South and see you soon at the movies.